was one would say praise nature. The agnostic would say praise nature. Don't worship anything that you can't see, the intangible. Only worship nature, so says the agnostic. Do homage to reason, so would say the rationalist. Sing of wine and feasting and sensuality, so would say the profligate this morning. Sing of wars and victories and conquest, so would say the conquerors this morning. Sing of me, says the Pharisee, the self-righteous man. But praise the Savior, says the believer. And I join with those this morning saying, let's praise the King. Let's praise the Redeemer. But our subject this morning, why the cheering stopped, suggests that there were reasons why the cheering stopped. Some years ago, a book was written by a noted American historian entitled When the Cheering Stopped. It was the story concerning the late President Woodrow Wilson and the events that led up to and following World War I. When World War I was over, President Woodrow Wilson was an international hero at that point. There was a great spirit of optimism, not only in America, but abroad. In fact, people actually believed that that was the last war that was ever going to have to be fought, and that our world now was safe for democracy. On his first visit to Paris after World War I, Wilson was greeted by cheering mobs. In fact, he was actually more popular there than the heroes of France itself. The same was true when he went over to England and on over into Italy. In Vienna, at a hospital, a Red Cross worker had told the children there will be no Christmas presents this year because of the war, because of hard times. But the children didn't believe that nurse. They said President Woodrow Wilson is coming, and they knew everything was going to be all right if Wilson came. The cheering for Wilson lasted about a year. Then it gradually began to stop. It turned out that the political leaders in Europe were more concerned about their own agendas than they were lasting peace. At home, Wilson ran into opposition as well. In the United States Senate, turned down his League of Nations idea, did not ratify that. And under the strain of all of this opposition and pressure, President Woodrow Wilson's health began to fail. It began to break, in fact. In fact, the next election, his party was defeated, miserably defeated. So it was that Woodrow Wilson, a man that barely a year or two before had been heralded as the New World Messiah, came to the end of his days a broken and a defeated man. I guess that's a sad story in human history, but it's not altogether an unfamiliar one, is it? It happened that way to Jesus. Jesus, the one that now on Palm Sunday is being acclaimed as the King of the Jews. Blessed is he that comes in the name of our father David. Hosanna, Hosanna to the highest. But in a few days the cheering is stopped and the cry is for crucifixion. I want to share with you this morning 3 reasons why the cheering stopped. I would suggest to you, first of all, the cheering stopped because Jesus spoke more and more of commitment. Of commitment. The mass of people today know little, and most of them know nothing about true commitment. They flip from one idea to another, to the next, from one vocation or project to another, and even from one domestic relationship to another, to a successive one, and some of them several successive ones. Thus, when Jesus called people to commit, the cheering stopped. Matthew, or Mark rather, chapter 12 and verse 17, Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." God and country were once top priorities, but loss of faith in both has resulted in such a low morale in our own country and around the world that there's little commitment to either God or country. In John's Gospel, chapter 6, Jesus declared, "I am the bread that came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. But except ye eat of the flesh of the Son of Man and drink of his blood, ye have no life in you." What did the disciples say? They said, "This is a hard saying." That's a hard saying. Who can hear it? And many began to drop off when Jesus began to talk about commitment. Not only did they drop off, but they dropped out. Until Jesus finally asked the 12, "Will ye also go away?" If you want to hear moans and groans, if you want to see mutiny, if you want the true nature to surface, then just call for commitment. The cheering stopped because Jesus called for more and more of commitment. Charles or Clarence Forsenberg, one of the great pulpiters of Methodism, tells of a story that occurred to him a number of years ago when he was on the campus of Nebraska Wesleyan talking to a group of students who were ministerial students, and they claimed that they were interested in the ministry. He asked them, "How many of you are definitely committed to going into a parish ministry?" And when he asked that question of those ministerial students, only one raised their hand. In fact, a young lady spoke up and said, "I have problems with the way you use that word commitment. That sounds very binding. That sounds very restricting." You see, the church of today has become an institution where even belief in God is somewhat optional in some quarters. In fact, the basic appeal is to the self-defined needs rather than to the call of radical discipleship. Many churches are doing surveys in their community. If they want to be a mega church in particular, they're surveying their community of what people say are their perceived needs. And then rather than ministering the gospel that meets all needs, they proceed to try to answer and fulfill the perceived needs of people. Our concept of commercialism, or consumerism rather, has swept and crept into the church. It's, look at what our church can offer you. In this atmosphere of a sorority and rush party, if you begin to talk about discipleship, you find immediately the cheering stops. You see, discipleship, my friends, means knowing who Jesus Christ is and then following that revelation that has been made known to us in His teaching, in His death, in His resurrection, and in His presence. Jesus called for commitment, and the cheering stopped. Secondly, this morning, the cheering stopped because Jesus would not compromise.